everyone. Welcome to Teacher Time. I'm Gail Joseph.
I'm Sameh Soleimani.
And I'm Virginia C. And we are from the National Center on Early Childhood Development, Teaching, and Learning. And we are so excited to have you join us today for a special episode of Teacher Time focused on preschool environments.
Absolutely. And I have to say, it's a very special episode for many reasons. First, we're going to 90 minutes. We usually stop at an hour, but just so you know, we're going to be here for 90 minutes because we hope to get to some of your questions. But we also have packed this episode full of practical strategies to help prevent behaviors that challenge us. And who doesn't want more of those? These are always such great reminders for us too. The other thing that makes this a super special episode is that we are coming to you live from our Teacher Time studios, which is in Seattle, Washington. We are right here on the water, and we wanted to let you know that because you might hear some boats honking. We can't control that. You might hear some boats honking, and then keep your eyes for real excitement. There is a bridge behind us that actually might go up if a very tall boat goes under it. All to help you know that we are live. We're absolutely live and here for you. So just so you know, thank you for joining this very special episode. Let's start by checking in. I think it's always a great idea to check in with how you're feeling. This is the Teacher Time Feeling Creature Tree. You can find it in the resource list if you want to use it to check in with your teaching staff, or if you want to check in with how children are feeling as well. Anybody can use it, but the way you do it is you just find the number of the creature, or numbers, because you might have more than one feeling at the same time, that best corresponds to how you're feeling, and then you just try and identify and name it. So I definitely am feeling like 18 in that little threesome there, because I love that I have my co-host supporting me. I'm feeling a little bit like 9, like woohoo, here we are live, and hoping that somebody like number 4 is there to catch me. That's kind of how I'm feeling today. Virginia, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling a bit of 16, kind of on that leaf, supported by my colleagues here and by that leaf, and also just excited, like 15, you know? 15 looks super excited.
15 looks really excited. Teacher Time viewers, make sure that you tell us how you're feeling too. So go ahead and use that Q&A. This is a good opportunity, and enter in which number you are and why. And while you're doing that, Sameh, let's check in with you.
Thanks, Gail. I would say probably 16 or 12, also feeling very supported, similar to Virginia, and also just being part of this learning community. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Absolutely is. We see some people commenting, oh, we've got some 10s, some 13s. I'm keeping an eye out. I'm hoping no one's feeling really down, but if you are, we're glad you're with us. We know that teaching is hard work. It's heart work, as we say. And we're so glad that you're here with us, tuning in, and we hope we give you some tips that make you feel inspired and excited. And we hope somebody's feeling like number 20, just on top of the tree today. All right, Virginia.
All right. So this is a special episode dedicated to tips that can help you get off to a good start, but they can be implemented at any point in time to prevent behaviors that are challenging and also help maximize learning time. So we want to know from you, when will new children be starting in your program? Enter your response below. Perhaps they've already begun, maybe later this month in September. I know for me, it was always September, right after Labor Day was when our kids would start. So let us know.
Give people a little moment to finish that. I'm really excited to know this. Yeah, it's definitely in the Northwest. We would start after Labor Day, but I think people start earlier. Maybe in California they start sooner.
Yeah, I've been surprised to see some August start dates.
Awesome. Right. We've got Adriana starting on Wednesday.
That's all right.
We're so exciting. Monday. Okay, August. Yeah, quite a few starting in August. Well, thank you for letting us know. And it looks like
all right,
September. Yeah, September's the winner.
September is the winner, but some people already have some new children beginning, and that is great to know and to keep in mind, because we're going to talk about some tips that you can use hopefully before children even begin. So for those of you starting Wednesday, we want you to get these tips in place, but also you can use them at any time throughout the year. Now, whether you are new to early learning or you've been teaching for several years, the beginning of the year is just always such a special time to me. I always get very excited about the starting with a new group of children. Have said goodbye to the old group, still missing them, but then getting really excited about the new group. But it's also a really great time to put so many prevention practices in place that can really maximize children's learning time, maximize children's fun in programs, and really decrease or prevent the likelihood of challenging behaviors from occurring in the first place. But the other thing that we always want to be thinking about with our new year is really thinking about equity, inclusion, and belonging. We want to ultimately create learning settings that feel like you can belong with your authentic self, whether you are a teacher, a teacher's aide, a volunteer in a classroom, but also if you're a child or a family member of that child, we want to create spaces where you feel like you can belong and bring your whole authentic self. So we're always thinking about equity and making sure that the tips and strategies that we're putting in place, the way that we're teaching, the way that we're supporting learners, that we're making sure that those work for each and every learner in our programs and not just for a few of them. So as we go through our tips and strategies today, because we have 10 great tips that we want you to be thinking about. And if you already have these in your place, in your programs, we want to hear from you. We want you to be telling us that. But we also want you to be thinking about how will these work for each and every child in your program. So always be thinking about that as well.
Absolutely, so important. Okay, so now let's get started on our top 10 tips for creating supportive environments that can help prevent behaviors that challenge us. Here we go.
All right. So tip number 10 is about the importance of establishing a predictable schedule. So we can do this in a variety of ways. The first is really just to create a visual schedule and using this schedule consistently. And also, it's important to keep the schedule simple and balancing activities throughout the day. It's also important to make sure your schedule is posted and referring to it often. And then also letting the children know when there might be changes to the schedule. And then there's also important to think about the ways that you can individualize or provide individualized schedules for some children that might need that. And make sure to check out your viewer's guide for a helpful handout with these tips for establishing a schedule. I don't think we can say it enough, right, Gail, that having that predictable schedule is just so important.
Really, I think it's like, we have it as the number 10, but it could be the number 1 tip for preventing behaviors that challenge us, and all the ways that you are presenting it to us are so helpful visually, consistently.
Yes. So here are some examples of schedules from learning environments from across the country. Feel free to enter in the Q&A which one is the one that is similar to the one you use, or maybe the one that you like best. So on the top left, we see that there is a picture or a schedule with words and pictures that's laid out horizontally. The picture next to that is a picture or is a schedule that uses multiple means of representation. So we see pictures and little small, cute little 3D objects. I'm amazed how they got those to stick.
That's right.
Fine motor skills.
Exactly. But this is a great way to represent the different schedule components. The third schedule is a schedule with words in English and Spanish along with a photograph. And then the fourth picture is a schedule that has words only, but it is in English and Spanish. And this schedule looks very familiar to me because this was in a classroom that I was in.
Oh, Virginia, it's your schedule.
And then on the bottom row, we have a schedule that has words in English and Spanish, a photograph of the children, and then times on these clockwise apples that kind of help children mimic, the hand on a clock, on an analog clock. And then that final photograph is a picture of an educator pointing to a felt board with a schedule that has pictures and words and times. And some things to note about these schedules or to highlight is that these schedules are posted in multiple languages. And they also have photographs that represent the children that are in the programs. And then finally, I love that the pieces of these schedules are movable to help indicate when an activity is complete or done, like a check off your list, or just to indicate any changes.
I love that. And people are chatting in, they're talking about what kind of schedules they use in their programs. I know our Q&A support team are sending those out so that everyone can see. And we're hearing people also add some ideas there. That idea of checking things off, like removing it when it's all done, can be really supportive for children. I love the idea of a schedule that goes left to right, kind of like the way we learn to read, and just really great ways. But I think the most important thing to take away from schedules is to have one and to follow it consistently. It's that like having a consistent way of having a rhythm to the day is what really works for children. They start to internalize it and can decrease some stress, and they know what's happening next. It's a great way to prevent some challenging behaviors. Okay. All right. Tip number 9 is to think about the physical arrangement of the classroom. Now, there are so many tips within this tip. So hold on. We got a few slides here. But the first thing to think about when you're thinking about the physical arrangement of your classroom is to create that welcoming environment where children see themselves, where everyone belongs. And we know that children and families in our programs are really the best source of that material, right? So I love the classrooms that I see where they actually have family photo frames, and they're the real families of the children in that program. Create such a home-like setting, and really can be responsive. So we always want to be thinking about that. How do we make sure everyone feels like they belong? But here's some other little tips that we want to talk about. One thing in the physical arrangement is to make sure that there is a place where children can store their personal items. Here we see some examples from around the country, other programs that have submitted some photos for us. I like this one on the left-hand side. This comes from a program in Alaska, and it has not only the children's names above the cubby so they can find it, but there's also some lovely photos and images of Alaskan Native children. So that feeling of their culture is represented right there. You see the multiple colorful baskets where they have the child's photo and the child's name. And then it was often the case in my Head Start classroom that children had to share a cubby. And so we have both children's pictures represented and their names so that they can find it. And the other thing to think about is how will children find their cubbies, right? So clearly when they have their photos, when they have their names on there, they can find their cubbies. But also think about where the cubbies are in the classroom. When you think about the physical arrangement, they should be someplace where close to when children enter, right? Because if the cubbies are located all the way across the classroom, it's hard when you're a young child or anyone not to get distracted and want to play and stop. And then I put down my backpack and my coat and I forgot where it is. And that creates some issues. So you want to think about where is it, in terms of the flow of the classroom, can it be right near there? And thinking about how to make those cubbies accessible for children. Some children might need to have their cubby next to maybe a bench. So maybe they will be able to take their backpack off and their coat off if they can sit and stabilize themselves first, and then hang it up so that the cubby's right next to that bench. So thinking about how we can make them accessible. And then how can you engage families to decorate the cubbies to really up that sense of belonging? So one of the things I love to do in my classroom was our first activity that we did either when we were visiting families at their home before the classroom even started, or we would do kind of a warm-up day where children and families would come to the classroom, is I gave them a construction paper house and they all got to decorate it. And I took a picture of their family and put it on the house, and then also a picture of the child and put a little bit of Velcro on that to get to another strategy that we'll talk about later on, where children would check in. But that way, children, when they came to the school that day, they saw their families in their cubbies. They knew that's where their stuff belonged.
Such great ideas.
Isn't that fun to kind of
that.
represent? And I know we've got so many ideas coming in, flying into our little Q&A there too. All right, here's another physical arrangement tip that we want to give, and that is to make sure that children know where they need to be in space, if you will. So we use names and pictures to identify their cubbies. That one's pretty obvious. But here we have a teacher that is putting out, before children arrive, she's putting out the names and photos of where the children will come sit during their large group time. So their large group time is a time when you get to acknowledge everyone, where you really build some community. And so when children come over, they just have to find their name and their photo and sit on that spot. So that there you can see prevents some challenging behavior. They don't have to struggle and push and shove, and somebody's not in front of somebody else, et cetera. And then this teacher is also really intentionally thinking about who might get easily distracted. So I want to put their back to what might distract them, whether that's the block shelf or the classroom door or the window. They're thinking about who might do better sitting closer to the teacher, where the teacher can provide some more reminders. They're thinking about who might do better sitting next to a peer model that can help support them. Now, I know I've told this story before, so just pretend that you haven't heard it before, but I had, you know how some children suck their thumb to soothe and then rub their ear. Well, I had a boy in my classroom that would suck his thumb and then he wanted to hold the ear of the person next to him. Oh. And so I always had to make sure that, you know, someone who was sitting next to Cesar was like, okay, tolerant with that, right? And it would be okay with that. But the idea here is that you can prevent so much by having this thought out beforehand. And what I love that this teacher does too is that because the names are set out before children arrive, if Giovanni's not there that day, there's still a spot there for Giovanni, and the teacher can still acknowledge and pick up Giovanni's name card and say, oh, Giovanni's not here today. He's not feeling well. I hope he feels better soon. Let's give him a big hug. And that just really creates a sense of belonging, but also keeps the, you know, the tradition and the routine about finding your spot and sitting down. All right, I'll talk about a few of these other considerations around the physical arrangement. So we also, you know, we've talked about having a welcoming place where everyone belongs. The other thing to think about is the physical arrangement should really support the schedule and vice versa. They should work together. So whatever the schedule is, right? Like if children arrive and then you want them to find a book and sit down, then you want that book corner to be close to where children enter in. We already talked about where the cubbies might be, so that there's just a nice flow. You just think about how you can create a flow. And there's lots of tips and more strategies in the viewer's guide, so you can learn more about what we mean when we talk about that flow. The other thing is to have a variety of learning centers with clear boundaries so that children know where one learning center is and where another one might start. To have noisy and quiet zones in your classroom. So quiet activities next to quiet activities and more noisy ones next to noisier areas. Avoiding wide open spaces, because if you want to promote large motor skills, have wide open spaces. But if you really want children to be using walking feet inside the classroom, then you want to avoid wide open areas. So think about that. Like maybe you have a wide open area for circle time, but maybe you can pull the sensory table into that area during center time so that it breaks it up a little bit. Because if I am 4 and you tell me to get from here to there in the wide open area, of course I'm going to run or jump or tumble or roll or do something. Twirl, exactly. All kinds of ways, which might be really exciting and fun. But if that's not what you want to have happen, then I might not have those wide open areas. You can visually close areas when they're not open to use. So I know that sometimes you might want children to just be in a couple areas because of supervision. So if that other learning center is not open yet, cover it up. Like maybe there's a curtain that goes over the book shelf or the block shelf. Maybe you cover it up with a sheet, right? The computer area, if that's not in use yet. Maybe you put a little stop sign there so that children know, like, stop, that's not open yet, but it will be later. So visually close. And then, of course, intentionally choose materials and resources in visuals. Don't overstimulate. I know some teachers like to start with just a few things in the classroom and get a nice calm, sense going before they add more things in that room. So those are just some other little tips and tricks. We see some other people adding some of the tips and tricks that they use too into the Q&A, which is really exciting there. And
okay, so we have tip number 8, establishing routines for the classroom. So routines help your classroom and family childcare run smoothly, which really maximizes learning time and prevents anxiousness and behaviors that challenge us. So routines, I mean, they're important for everybody, us as adults too, right? We really want to know what's going to happen next. It alleviates a lot of kind of that anxiousness. So routines are completed similarly each day. In learning environments where routines are in place, children know what to do with little assistance from adults. So it really frees us up to support children who may need a little bit more assistance to complete the routine. And let's see. So we'd love to hear some of routines that you have in place in your settings. So if you could just put that in the Q&A, we'd love to hear from you.
I love that. I mean, routines really are key to helping everything move smoothly.
Absolutely.
Don't you think? Like just giving that natural rhythm of the day.
Sure. Yeah. I really love the word rhythm that you're using. Kind of just keeps the beat.
Oh, I love that. Yeah,
right?
keeping the beat of the classroom.
The beat,
That's
right?
so great.
I feel like that needs to be a song.
It should, right?
Keep the beat.
That might be a song.
I love it. I love it. So people are putting some ideas in there about just some of the routines that they have. You know, I know when I taught Head Start, brushing teeth, a big routine that we always had. Having daily schedules as a routine. Greeting, absolutely.
Attendance check-in.
These are great. Yeah, I love. We've got consistency is key. That might be a line in our song of "Keep the Beat."
I like that.
All
Can
right.
we borrow that?
Oh yeah, exactly. All right, keep that going. Hand washing is a big one. Yeah, absolutely. Keep entering those things in, and we'll move on to our next little strategy here, which is arrival. Thinking about again, we're still just in our same tip here about routines. But one routine to attend to and to think about for those of you who haven't started yet is, what do you want children to do during arrival time? Just thinking about that. What will children do? Will they come check in? Now, I love this idea of the home to school check-in. That's the one I was talking about when I have families decorate houses and put those houses in their cubby. And then they have a little Velcro picture of the child by themselves. And what children would do is they'd put their stuff in their cubby. Then they take themselves out away from their family and they check themselves into the school, right? So it gave them just kind of a little bit of control over that, a little bit of, they might have some big feelings about that, but it just gave them a little bit of control because then they knew that they could go back with their family at the end of the day. So thinking about that. But one thing that was key is that I wanted children to go to the cubby first. So they would walk in and the routine was to go to their cubby, put their things away in the cubby, take themselves away from their families. That sounds so terrible, but taking themselves away from their family and checking into their school family. That feels better, their classroom family. And then the schoolhouse where they would check in was like a construction paper schoolhouse and that had lots of little Velcro. They checked themselves in. That was right next to the sink because the next thing I wanted them to do was wash their hands. So that's a way that you can have the physical arrangement kind of support the flow. You might have children check in with how they're feeling in the day, just like that second one. You might have children check in or arrive and wash their hands right away. So think about what that routine is and how you're going to teach that and support all of the children. Now, one thing that I also think about with arrival time is in my classroom, children didn't arrive all at the same time. So a group of children came with some Head Start transportation, but some children came with their families and some came a little bit later. And so I always wanted to start the day with something that was a little bit low key, that children could just like a little buffer activity. So maybe that was getting a book and reading, looking at the pictures and reading books on the carpet. Maybe it was starting even outside until all the children arrived. But if you have something like that where children can be engaged independently, then you can help support and greet the families and greet children.
Definitely. I remember I would have journals out and then they would go grab, the marker, the color pencil, whatever they felt like that day. And they would just draw how they felt, what they wanted to do.
It's a relaxing way to start the day.
And have fun. And then you could keep that, right? Like almost for a portfolio of like what a great idea.
Documentation.
I love that, Virginia. Documentation, yes. And then this is a little bit of what I already talked about with your arrival time routine, right? So here's just another example of that. Who's here today? So moving from home into the school, and then just being really mindful about a sense of belonging. So maybe that is a photo of family and moving from family into the school, because not everyone has a home that looks like that home. So maybe you make sure that the photos really represent where children are so that they feel that sense of themselves there. Now, here's another tip on routines, and that is to also think about routines within routines. So we think about keeping the rhythm, keeping the beat of the classroom. And one way that we can keep that strong is by establishing even routines within routines. So here is our circle time or our large group, and we have a routine within that routine. We start with a hello song, then we look at the calendar, then we do a movement activity or sing a song, and then we look at a book, and then we're done and we move on to the next thing. And if we can keep that rhythm going, it doesn't mean we do the same hello song every day or the same movement activity every day, but it just means we go in that order so that children start to internalize it. It can decrease some of their anxiety around that, and will definitely reduce some challenging behavior because they'll be able to predict what happens next. Another routine that you can think about is how will children wait for a turn? That is so hard. It's one of the big skills that we learn in preschool. And so here's a couple of ideas that you might want to think about. One is a counting card. I love these. It's just a laminated piece of paper, 1 through 20, and the child does touch counting on each square. If they can count, they are counting, and they're definitely getting a lot of practice in. While somebody else has a turn, when they get to 20, they switch. Here you see a turn-taking chart, lots of Velcro going on here, but it's Adam's turn. So Adam finds a photo and his name and puts it on under the computer there. And then Sarah comes along and she would really like a turn. So she finds her name. Those are all in this little pocket, and puts her name there. And that signifies that when Adam's turn is up, maybe there's a little digital alarm or some kind of turn taking. When Adam's turn is up, they know that they put their name in the pocket there, and then they go find Sarah, who it's now their turn. And we know that lots of timers can help, like some people like digital timers, some people like sand timers.
And speaking of sand timers, let's watch a quick DIY do-it-yourself video. Tips on how to make your own sand timer. Enjoy.
What an awesome quick DIY video. I love those. So we're on to tip number 7. And tip number 7 is to create supportive transitions. And each transition is like a type of routine. So you might already be thinking about transition, but here are some other tips. So the first is to eliminate any unnecessary transitions or wait times. So whenever groups of children are transitioning together in a large group, for example, down the hall, they use the restroom, some children are going to have to wait. So you can either eliminate the wait time by transitioning in smaller groups or having independent transitions. But if the whole group transition is unavoidable, it's important to have a plan in place for what children will do as they wait. You can use the counting cards, as Gail just mentioned, but you can use songs, finger play, listening to a book, whatever it is, just be sure to have a plan in place. Another thing that's important is to make sure to teach the children the expectations during the transitions. And then finally, using a consistent cue for children to know when a change is going to happen. For example, ringing the bell, like we see in this photograph, or it could be a song, a chant, flickering the lights, or you can use a bunch of them combined together to be inclusive of children's various modalities. The key is really just to be consistent. And also with transitions, when motivating children to the next transition, sometimes it's nice to use a special activity or a special material really to get them engaged. So in this photograph, we see that this teacher is motivating children to line up to go home by blowing bubbles. And blowing bubbles reinforces and keeps the children that are already there and ready engaged, but also serves to motivate the other children to hurry up and participate in the transition as well. So we'd love to hear from you. What ideas of special materials or activities do you have to support transitions? Enter those into the Q&A.
I love all those ideas. And somebody reminded us that with that DIY sand timer that we could use sand, absolutely. In that video, it uses sugar, and we know that we don't usually use food resources for things like that. But if you did not have any other things, that might be something that you do have available to you and can grab, but definitely use sand if you have it. Thanks for that reminder.
Absolutely. Well, now let's watch a video of teacher Aubrey sharing some helpful tips on preparing children for transitions.
The important thing when you're starting planning transitions for your students is to make sure that the transitions are fast, and they're fun, and they're functional. If you find that children are sitting around and waiting during a transition, you can be thinking about how you can engage them during that time. And that might mean setting up an activity that they can do while they wait, or having a song that they all engage in at the same time. And that will make it so that there aren't children kind of wandering around or getting into some other activity during that time. Incorporating multiple modes of participation is also important during a transition. If you're signaling that it's time to switch over to the next activity, you can use body movements, visual cues, and sounds as indicators that we're moving into the next part of the day. And that can help students to get familiar with what the routine is faster, and also feel like they're more in control of it because they're participating in that signal. So the last thing would be make sure that children know what's coming next. So we're not just saying it's time to clean up. We're saying we're cleaning up the carpet so that we can read books on the carpet now.
Teacher Aubrey has such great tips. I love that. What does she say? Fast, fun, and functional. That's perfect. So I think about your transition tips that way. We kind of said this, but I just want to reiterate this because this is one of my favorite tips around supporting transitions, which seems counterintuitive, but that is to begin when just a few children are ready, the next activity. And I think you kind of said that, Virginia, but it's such a great tip because if you're starting circle time, as an example in this little slide here, and the first children come over because you've rung the bell and said it's circle time, and children come over, sometimes what we do as teachers is we want to wait and wait and wait until every child is there, right? Because it's a whole group time. We want everyone there. And so these children don't get anything. They're just kind of left to their own devices to entertain themselves while the teacher is like trying to call all the other children there. So instead, I would start with these children and do something super exciting that not only keeps them engaged, reinforces them for coming right away, but it motivates other children to come along too. So the teacher might blow bubbles, like you said. They might sing a special song. I think it's because I live in Seattle, but we used to get a little water bottle and we'd squirt water and we'd be like, it's raining, get out your umbrella. And children would think that was so much fun and run over to get sprayed by the water. So who knew? But it could be whatever it is. Maybe it's a special puppet that makes an appearance and the children love to talk to the llama. And so they come over and they get to interact with the llama because they came over to circle time first. And then once all the children are there, you can start that routine that we talked about. But that's just one of my very favorite tips is starting just a few children are ready. And also planning, like when children go to a small group activity, what is it that they can get started with right away that doesn't require the teacher to start it? Because we all know that we're going to help support a child, provide individual attention to get over to the small group table. So can they start with Play-Doh? Can they start with a coloring activity? Can there just be something that they can start right away? And that is one of my favorite tips there to start.
Something that I've really liked to do during transitions is either like a snapping or a clapping. Speaking of rhythm, you can tell I'm kind of a music person, but maybe snap, snap, or clap, clap and children can follow along, and then the other children are kind of motivated to want to join the fun.
That.
So that's something that I've found very successful with preschool age children.
And you can kind of change it up, and it's novel.
Yeah, and some people are practicing their snapping. So.
Exactly.
I love that. That's such a great one. Now, some children might want to know where they're going next. And sometimes we can do that not only by telling them what is going to happen next, like teacher Aubrey told us about, but we might also want to show them a picture of where they're going next. And so these are some of our favorite transition cue cards. They are available in the viewer's guide too. And I know that we had a similar strategy. So we would print these out, cut them out, laminate them so they lasted, put them on a belt ring. We just always had them. Yeah, like here's where we're going next. And we could show children, you could hang them around the classroom, just make them available. But they're really helpful. And sometimes children that need a little extra support could carry it to the next activity.
They love
Any
that.
excuse to laminate is what I like to say.
I
love laminating.
Well,
very satisfying.
It makes things last. It's really great.
Well, now let's watch a video of teacher Jenny sharing some ideas to help transitions move forward smoothly. And as you watch, we'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions. So feel free to enter those into the Q&A as you watch.
Q&A is busy. We love it. So many ideas are coming in.
So great.
Thinking about transitions and supporting kids in transitions, I think the biggest thing I think about is making sure everyone has something to do. And so whether that's you've got a song going that kids are singing, there's an activity and kids have jobs that they're doing to help move a transition forward. So things like they're putting their own cot sheets on when you're transitioning from the circle into nap time or to get ready for nap time. Somebody is opening and holding the door when you're lining up to go outside, or there's someone who's taking on different roles, helping with the schedule, moving the clip on the schedule if you track your schedule during the day, having kids have something to do during those transitions. And then for adults, I think the biggest thing in our classroom that helped with transitions is having one adult that is managing the transition and the next activity is getting started. So the other adult is already starting the activity. It helps kids be excited to get done what they need to get done to transition and make sure that there's no wait time. So if you're transitioning from being in free choice centers into circle, there's a warning that the transition's coming. Then you tell kids that it's time to transition. You go through whatever your rules are for the transition, asking kids to clean up and walk to the rug. And your other co-teacher is already at the rug and starting the first song or first activity of circle so that no one is waiting and everybody is encouraged and excited to come over and join.
Thank you for your reflections, insights, and questions. Such great questions. As many of us have experienced, sometimes transitions can be a bit tricky when there's only one educator in the room, and we've all been there, right? Mm-hmm. So let's hear from teacher Jenny how transitions can be supported during those instances.
I think that making sure then that where you are sending kids to next, they've really gotten a lot of clear instruction about what they're supposed to do and that there's something for them to do there. So for example, maybe you're transitioning from outside and coming inside into the classroom to pack up for the end of the day. Maybe there's a clear direction that there's a basket where you have journals and colored pencils and books. And those are the really limited options for what kids can do when they come in from that specific transition. So that kind of serves that same purpose as having another teacher there starting the activity. But it's something really clear that children know what to do when they come inside, and giving those reminders each time when you're coming inside about, remember, we're coming inside. What does that mean we can do? And encouraging kids to help remind each other what they're supposed to do when they get there.
So when children are having a difficulty with the transition, providing a choice as to how to complete that transition can be very helpful. It gives the child some agency and a sense of control that can both calm and motivate the child to complete that transition. So some examples of choices might be, do you want to sit on the green mat or the blue mat? Would you like to use a scoop or tongs? And do you want to put the blocks away or the farm animals? And studies have shown that children usually pick the latter or the second option, making it two options that both work for you.
I love that. It's always my go-to, right? Like, give a choice.
Absolutely.
It's so great. Okay, so we've talked a lot about transitions. That was a big tip that we had. And we just want you to know that in the viewer's guide, there's a transition planning form. And if this is like your 20th year teaching or your first year teaching, it's always, if you haven't already written down like what the transitions are, what the expectation is for what the children do, and what the expectation is for what the adults do to support the transition, it's just really a great idea. It clarifies it in your mind, first of all, because you go through and you think like, okay, this is this, this is this. And it is so great when there's a new staff member that you can share it with. Maybe there's a family member volunteering in the program. You can share that with them as well. And it really helps get the whole teaching team on the same page. So definitely do that. If you haven't had a chance, or I would highly suggest it.
All right, so moving on to tip number 6, and that is rules. So we've already covered a predictable schedule, routines, supportive transitions, and each of these is essential for creating a calm and happy rhythm in your setting. And rules are helpful to encourage positive interactions between children, the educator, and the learning materials in your environment. And experienced educators just like yourself know that rules, although rules don't necessarily help you have your environment run smoothly, because those are your routines, rules do help convey the important ways that we learn together in a group safely. So here are the rules about rules. So generally, keep your rules simple and have them positively stated, and that they frame safety and the well-being of community members and the materials. It's also a great idea to involve children in developing the rules. This way it helps them have an ownership and really kind of stick to it because they're the ones that came up with it. Try keeping the focus on the self, others, and the classroom ready for learning. Teach the rules proactively and post the rules where children can see them. And also, it's important to communicate the rules to families so that they know what the expectations are for their children in your learning environment. And then reinforce the rules at a higher rate at the beginning of the year and maybe a lower rate at the end of the year because the kids are already getting it, they know them.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. And the next thing, we have some examples. So here are some example visuals to support the rules. So on the left, we see an example of behavior expectations like walking feet and quiet mouth. And on the right, there are examples of behavior. On the right, there's a picture of school rules that are categorized by us, each other, and our things. And make sure to check out your viewer's guide for more visuals for rules. And then here is another great example that I just love. These rules say, be safe, be friendly, and be a learner.
I love that.
Love it. Yep.
Pretty much covers
it all.
all of it, right?
Yeah.
And we can clearly see that the children and the adults came up with these rules together on these posters. And co-creating rules with children is such a great way to take into account their ideas, which helps build a sense of community and belonging. So let us know, what are some rules that you have or will have for your setting? Enter those in the Q&A. And as you're watching those, we're also going to watch a video of an experienced teacher discuss how they approach establishing rules and expectations.
We involve the kids in establishing the rules, generally by having them help generate some of those more details. And a lot of times they give really cool responses that are right on target. You know, when we talk about what does it mean to be a good friend, a lot of kids will volunteer, oh, that means sharing toys, that means being nice to them, that means saying nice things. And so they feel that ownership too. And sometimes groups of children emphasize different things. Some groups might emphasize, you know, taking turns with materials, while another group might might focus on compliments, saying nice things to each other. And that's totally fine. Both of them demonstrate, the expected behavior of being a good friend.
I love teacher Fanny and her tips so much. We've been hearing from so many great teachers, as well as our Teacher Time viewers that are out there putting their ideas in as well. We would love it if you have photos of things like your schedule, transition cue cards, any of that stuff that you feel like you can have permission to post and share on My Peers. Let's do it. Let's be this learning community, because I had never seen that the rule be a learner before, but now I wish I would have known that one for a very long time. All right, so tip number 5, we're halfway there. We're counting down from 10, we're at 5. But tip number 5 is staffing charts and zoning to help you organize staff by using these tools we're going to tell you about if you don't already use these. And if you do use these, please tell us about it in the Q&A, because we want to know how you use them in your program. But basically what you can see on this picture here is that somebody has taken their learning environment, their classroom, and divided it into 3 different zones. This is if they have 3 different adults. So maybe there's a teacher, a teacher assistant, and a volunteer in the classroom. Or maybe their early childhood special education itinerant teacher is joining that day, and so they have a 3rd in there, or the speech language pathologist is joining and they have them in the classroom supporting children. So however you might have 3 adults in your classroom, this one might be for you. And of course, if you only have 2, it would look a little bit different. And if it's 1, there's also a different way that you could do that. But the idea with zoning is that you divide the classroom into different zones, and you assign different adults to those zones. And then as an adult in that zone, I make sure that I practice zoning. I make sure that the environment looks inviting and exciting for children. When children enter that area, I'm watching them, I'm helping to engage them. And when that child or children leave that area and go into another zone, I'm also kind of giving the next adult in that area a little bit of a heads up. That way we can keep our eyes on all the children and make sure that they are engaged in learning and having fun. Now, the other thing that you can do is a staffing chart. This is one of my favorite strategies to use in a setting. And again, here we have kind of the high-end version here, where there's 3 staff people in a classroom. We know that's not the case for a lot of people. So you'll find tips and tricks for doing that with fewer adults in the classroom in the viewer's guide. But what you do here is you write down the left-hand side, you can see on that slide, the activities or the transitions of the day: arrival, breakfast, transition to outside, transition back to the classroom, circle time. Whatever your schedule is and whatever transitions you have children make, you put that down the left-hand side. Then across the top, however many adults you have in the classroom, you would say staff person A, staff person B. If you're lucky to have a staff person C, a staff person C. And you would say, what are the adults responsible for during that time? So during arrival, staff person A is going to make sure that they're at the door, they're greeting the families, they're greeting the children. Staff person B is over by the cubbies, helping children put their backpacks away. And staff person C is already getting the tables ready for breakfast, ready to receive the children. So you can imagine there's a really great flow. All the adults know where they need to be. All the children and families are being attended to. And then at breakfast time, rather than saying, you sit there, no, you sit there, no, you sit there, no, I'll sit over here. No, I think I better, instead of spending our time doing that, I know I'm at the red table. That means I go to the red table, I support the children at the red table, I engage with the children at the red table, et cetera. And then I also know that I'm the one that's going to signal the transition. So I've got my bubbles ready, ready to do that. And then staff person B knows they're going to clean up the breakfast tables, and staff person C knows they're helping the transition. So you can read the rest of that chart on your own. But this is just such a great way to help classrooms run smoothly. You could also imagine that if you're the lead teacher and your teaching assistant is out, or your co-teacher is out, you know where you're going to need to kind of get support, and maybe the director comes in to support for a little bit, or the ed manager comes in, and you can say, could you play the role of staff person B today? And they can look, because these are posted, and they can look and see. The other thing I would say is that in my classroom, we would rotate these. And the other thing that's great about this is that I would always say, if you were in charge of zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, you also, at the end of the day, you are responsible for cleaning up zone 1 and making sure zone 1 was ready for the next day. So all the paints were refilled and refreshed, and the dramatic play area had the clothes taken out of the refrigerator and put into the armoire, whatever it was that you had. anyways, it's just a great way to kind of help people organize themselves.
I really love this scale because,
Yeah.
you know, as we know in the classroom, so many unexpected things happen. So this is a way of kind of things we do have control over. We can kind of, you know, I always say the beautiful chaos can happen when we have some structure. So I think that's really,
Oh my gosh,
love
we
that. The
love
beautiful chaos of
Tanya is
learning.
dropping so many things on us that we're
a little bit of poetry for
loving.
you.
Yeah,
chaos.
Yes, and I
Yes.
just love it. So important to have
but
these
the structure,
things in
right?
place.
Right. So
Right.
structure allows that kind of beautiful chaos and fun, engaged
Right.
learning, right? If we don't have that structure, it's really hard to follow a child's lead in a project because we're dealing with all kinds of other
Right.
things.
Absolutely.
I'd love that. And then here we just have kind of tips for zoning. So if I'm zoning in an area, I make sure that I position myself where I can see all the children. And so that way I could scan, which is the other part, and then practice talking to the other teachers and saying, you know, here comes Jordan. I think he's really headed to that sand and water table, Virginia. So I know you're going to be ready to support. And that's the way that we would do the zoning. And now we're going to hear from Teacher Whitney talk about the benefits of zoning.
So a zoning plan is a plan for supervision of children. Basically, you would divide the space or the activities, depending on what your layout looks like, into certain areas. And then you would assign staff people to those areas. In our classroom, we decided to do a zoning plan because we have a very large space. We have lots of little nooks and crannies that can be difficult for supervision. And it just made sense for us to develop a plan that addressed all of those. The other part of it is that we wanted to make sure that we were rotating staff and that staff were getting to see all areas of the classroom and all children. It can be really easy to fall into patterns just like children do in regards to our behavior in the classroom. And having the zoning assignments gave everyone a little bit more purpose. So not only are they seeing other parts of the room, they're getting experience with supervising other parts of the room, they're also taking ownership of that area a little bit more because they realize, oh, I am here in zone 2. I'm responsible for all of these things. And yeah, it just empowers everybody a little bit.
Love that Teacher Whitney.
Great tips, Teacher Whitney. Tip number 4 is to figure out a routine to ensure the environment is ready for child engagement before children arrive. And I really love how all of these tips kind of work together and overlap. And that's sort of the point, right? These tips can support each other to support our well-oiled machine, as you put it. So this means having materials prepared and easy to access, the paints refreshed, the dramatic play area looking ready for fun, and the science center ready for experiments, as we can see in this photo here. And as we think about in advance of children arriving, we can also ensure that any modifications or adaptations a child needs are ready, and this is a really important one, that are included already in the activity. So for example, if small group time will involve scissors, the pair of adaptive scissors for a child with a fine motor delay is available and ready. This allows the child to engage right away with their peers without any kind of pause, and this can increase the child's engagement from the get-go. The care and prep of learning areas or zones can be entered into the staff chart that Gail was just talking about, which is linked in your viewer's guide as well. Another way to help prepare the environment for engagement is to provide some visual reminders of expected behaviors, which you can also find in your viewer's guide. So, wealth of resources. So here we have some examples of visuals for rules and routines. And you can see on the photo on the left, there are visuals of the steps for getting ready to go outside, really simple, chronological order. In the top right photo, there are visuals for ideas of what children can do while they're waiting. So children can sing ABCs, count, and that would be a great place to bring out that counting chart that Gail was talking about earlier. Again, laminated. Another excuse to laminate something. Seeing wheels on the bus. There's so many great ideas there. And the last photo is a picture of a first then visual support. First, a child a picture of a child playing with blocks, then a picture of a shelf where the blocks are put away. So supporting the child and knowing that when we're done with this is where you can put it away. Now, let's see some examples of visual support for play. On the left, there is a visual of a mealtime play setting in the dramatic play area. In the middle picture, we see there's a picture of a building providing ideas and inspirations, really a provocation for building in the block area. What can you build? This is an idea, and that can lead to so many other things, right? And the last photo shows the number of children that can play in the toys and games area at a time. So the child can actually physically take their stick and add their name to the area when joining. And it's a great way because, you know, if that area is already full, there's an indication. A teacher doesn't need to get involved and come in and say, hey, you know, the child, again, that agency of saying, hey, I know that this area is full and I'm going to make another choice now. Really supporting that independence as well.
I love that. The more things that the environment can do frees the teacher up to be able to individualize and support. Absolutely. And I love that so much.
Right. Think of the environment as a third teacher.
Absolutely.
Almost really helping you kind of with those environmental supports.
That is very key. And it takes prevention to do that, right? Like thinking ahead in advance. Right. I know we've talked a lot about supporting transitions, but visual supports can also be used to support transitions. Let's also say that visual supports might not help every child. So multiple modalities really are more inclusive. So we might have visual supports. We might also use auditory cues. We might use a gentle physical guidance to help support a child with a transition. But here's one way that visual supports could be used, and that is, quite simply, spaces on the floor. Now, I think we've had our fill of visual supports in this time of COVID. We've seen social distancing, lots of visual reminders of how to do transitions and be near each other safely. And here's the same thing. So children know where they can stand. They have their own space there. And knowing where I stand can reduce some anxiety. I don't have to push and shove and get into your space and, get into your bubble. I would tell children that everybody has a little bubble, and that's their bubble. And so I did have one child that used to always jump in and say, I'm in Virginia's bubble, but these kind of visual spaces can really help the child to understand where bubbles are and where bubbles aren't. But it just provides more information about expected behavior, and that always is helpful. And we are going to watch some teachers talk about how they use visual supports to support young children. Keep those comments coming in Q&A too.
A lot of our visuals are signs. We have signs put up, like I can just hold a sign up and they'll see a kid sitting crisscross applesauce and they know exactly what to do.
We have large group visuals, so the bigger poster size visuals, the whole paper size visuals. Then we have some visuals for individuals in our classroom, so the smaller ones. For example, we may have a schedule for some students, individual schedules. So they'll have their own schedules showing them, okay, now we're going to small group, so there'll be a picture of 4 kids in a small group. And now we're going to large group, so they'll see sitting in a circle.
It's a sign to remind them of the rules without actually having to state them, so they can stop for a minute and think, what does this mean? And then they can show us that they know what that rule is without us actually having to repeat it. It gives them time to think and follow through.
When we do our group transitions, we do lots of visuals. So we would have a large chart visual showing them what the expectation is, what we want them to do, this is what it should look like. And then we have those individual visuals for some students. So we would give the instructions to the entire class, and then we would reiterate those instructions for certain individuals during that time.
Our tip is for support for boarders, because some of our kids like to flip around, and we would like for them to have room to move and flip or whatever without actually hurting another kid. So it gives them space and room and not make them feel as confined.
They love to move, and more of them are attentive when they're moving. So giving them their own individual space to move in, it helps them a lot in helping them focus during group activities.
such great tips. I love that, providing a border and space for children to flip and move and, just do what they need to do. So now we're going to move on to tip number 3. And you are experienced educators that already know this, but tip number 3 is to get to know the children and families even before the program begins. And we can do this by having open houses, curriculum nights, classroom visits, which again, you already probably do. You can also do an All About Me survey, and there's one in your viewer's guide. We can have home visits and really incorporate children's interests from day one. And these pre-visits and knowledge of children's interests and concerns can really help ease separation anxiety for children and families. And now let's hear from Dr. Kathleen Meeker about the importance of getting to know children from the very beginning, children and families from the very beginning.
Families are a key member of the team, and they're a key member of the team from the very beginning. So I think the best advice to educators is to work really hard on investing in relationships with families from the very beginning. From the first time you meet a family and the first day a child comes to your program or your home care provider, and the first time they come to your home, spend the time getting to know that family, getting to know the family's expectations for you and their expectations for their child, how they interact with their child, how their child responds, what their child likes, what their child doesn't like at home, and kind of what they like to do with their child. And as you get to know some of those things, you get a feel for the family, you get a feel for the child, and it helps you be more responsive to the child when they're in your care. And it helps build a relationship with the family that's built on the positive from the very beginning.
So important to have that kind of foundation already set going into the year. So tip number 2 is to be thinking in advance about how you will encourage children's learning behavior. So think about your go-to ways of encouraging children. Smile, a thumbs up, a high five. Also plan to remind yourself to encourage every child in the program. Sometimes left to our own devices, we might unintentionally provide a lot of positive attention to some children in our class and less to others. And I think unintentional is the key word, because we never obviously want to do that. It's a human behavior, and we do need to be highly intentional so that we can avoid doing that. So to avoid our implicit biases getting in the way of good practice, we can create a chart or a quick reflection at the end of the day to consider if every child's experience was positive. So we would love to hear, do you have ways to remind yourself to encourage each child and to pay more attention to the positive? And we'd love to hear about it in the Q&A.
Thanks, Same. And it's so important, really to think about the different types of behavior and how we might also respond. So think now about typically challenging behaviors that you experience and think about what you want to see instead. So for example, walking instead of running. And now write down that positive opposite and think of how you might provide that behavior-specific encouragement. So for example, Jackson is using his walking feet. And you could even post this around the room and share it with classroom volunteers, because sometimes when you're in the mix of things, it's easy to forget. But if you have it posted visually, just quick on your wall, it's a great quick reminder. And then also you can think of fun ways that you can encourage appropriate learning behaviors. So in addition to verbal acknowledgement and high fives, such as high fives and or verbal encouragement, such as thank you for taking care of our classrooms, and high fives, we can provide more visuals, like add a puff ball to the puff jar when you share a warm fuzzy feeling, or a gumball to the gumball machine. And then you can have a special celebration with families when the children have completed the task. Let us know what fun ways you have or have you seen as classroom enforcers, and enter these into the Q&A, and we'll be sure to share them out with other people as well. And Gail.
I might have just dropped my mic. Apologies if you can't hear me so well. Sorry about that. I couldn't help myself. I brought one of my favorites. So this is, I don't know if people can see it. This is our little friendship bracelet jar. And so these are just those pot holder loops that you can get, craft loops that you can get a ton of in a bag. And we would challenge ourselves as teaching teams. We'd all take a handful and put them in our pockets, especially during outside time when we tended maybe less to attend to those positive opposites, like you said, and we'd be like, stop running, stop going down the slide the other way, whatever. And so we challenged ourselves to find children doing the right thing, and we would give them a little friendship loop, and then they could wear these around, and then when they came in from outside, they'd just drop them in the jar, and when the jar got to be full, we had a fun special celebration with their families as well. So kind of a fun thing. I just had to bring it because I love that.
I love that. Such a good idea.
And I love that idea of positive opposites, right? What do I want to see instead? And that's what I'm going to attend to. And we should know that when we attend to what we want to see instead, we're going to see more of that, which is
so true. We're manifesting it, really.
We absolutely are. Okay. Oh my gosh, we did it. We're to the number 1 tip of our 10 tips or countdown. Thank you for hanging with us for our special longer edition. But our number 1 tip has got to be to take care of yourself as an educator, as a home visitor, whatever role it is that you have. Working with children and families is hard work because it is hard work. It takes so much out of you. And so we want to make sure that you are restoring and nurturing yourself. Now, this is in quotes, and I have to say that this is something I've said myself. Maybe you have said this yourself as well. But I know that the difference between my more effective teaching moments and my less effective or my ineffective moments weren't because I all of a sudden forgot what evidence-based practices were or, forgot about having a predictable schedule. It really was because I wasn't feeling well myself that day. Maybe I had a fight and I didn't have strategies to regulate, my emotions before I came into the classroom. Maybe I didn't get a good night's sleep. Maybe I didn't eat great. I skipped breakfast and, so all of these things, we know that it's really hard to help support other children, other humans when we're not feeling well ourselves, when we're not feeling super nourished. So we always want to end our teacher time by making sure that we give you some stress buster tips that you can use. And that is because we know it is a human tendency to have what we call the negativity bias. It's actually how we've survived all these thousands of years is actually with this negativity bias. And that means that bad things, bad experiences stick like Velcro, and the good things that happen just slip away like Teflon. And so we know, though, that if we hold on to the bad things, our lives are shorter. We don't feel physically well. We don't have as positive of relationships. That's probably why we also don't feel very well. It's really hard to do our work supporting children and families when we're not feeling well ourselves. But because this is the bias that's built into us, we need to work extra hard to get those good things to stick and to stick with us. And so our tip today is one you've probably heard before, but I think it never hurts to remind ourselves, is about the power of gratitude. Gratitude is incredibly well researched, which people may or may not know. There's been entire books written on the research behind having gratitude and expressing gratitude. We know that people feel physically better. We know people tend to feel healthier, happier, more positive about the relationships they have. We actually know they heal faster from being sick when they have experienced gratitude. And so that is our tip today, is no matter where you are, no matter what's going on, can you find one thing to be grateful for and express that and bring that to your mind? That is our tip for you.
Thank you so much, Gail. It really is. It's a great way to start the day, end the day, in the middle of the day. And a routine of gratitude is a personal practice, but is also one that you can include in our work with children, really. We can develop gratitude circles and class journals, and that's a great way, again, to start or end your day.
my gosh, I love that. Like a gratitude circle at the end of the day, children just going around and saying what they're grateful for.
Absolutely. Such a great idea. And so important as well. Last but certainly not least, we want to take a moment of sincere gratitude and appreciation to thank all of you for all that you do and the important role you play in the lives and the futures of Head Start children and families. And we hope these tips have been helpful. And now we are ready to take some questions. So let's see, enter your questions into the Q&A box.
Yes, we're looking, if you see us looking at our computers, we're reading your questions now. If you have any questions, please enter those. If we don't get to them, you will definitely see them posted over in My Peers. And so we can, and also we know we have great Q&A support too. So maybe all of your questions have been answered. But if you have, or if you have some feedback to give us, we'd love to get some feedback. Or did you, how did you experience these 10 tips? How did you experience our live background? Anything, it's full game for you. Let's see here. I see some questions are coming in. Oh, great. Where would we find a record? Oh, good. I know the answer to this one, Lori. I'm so glad you asked. You can get this episode and archived episodes on DTL Push Play. It's a really great little resource for you. We have a slide with that URL in it. So sorry, it's on my same time.
We're both on top of it.
That's right. There you go. That's the Push Play. You can find this. You can listen to it. You can share it with your peers.
There's a great question here,
Good.
Gail, about what, from a participant, how do we support children who don't want to follow the rules? That's a great question.
Well, that is a really great question. And I think we want to, it might be that they aren't sure how to follow the rules, right? So it might not be that they intentionally don't want to, but it might be that they're not sure how. It might be that they have learned to get some time and attention from others by breaking the rules. So I think you want to be thoughtful. Again, here's where prevention helps, right? So what are the rules stated positively, involve children and engage them in helping to, and in fact, the child that is feeling like they don't want to follow the rules, I might actually take a picture of them following the rules and have them be kind of literally the poster child for following that rule. So I can say, oh, let's make sure to use our walking feet like Jacob in this picture. Jacob's using the walking feet as an example. And then really, really, really being intentional about catching the child when they are following that rule. And if they maybe aren't, I'm paying attention to the children that are following the rule as maybe a gentle reminder. But what else would you say about that one? That's a great question.
Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just looking at this jar and I was like, what a fun way too, maybe whatever it is, their child might be having difficulty, but if there's a bracelet you can earn,
Right.
or, just commenting from their own when they do follow the rules, or maybe their really good friend or peer in the room is following the rules and just encouraging them that way. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think something we touched upon was really supporting the learning community, really being a community, and that we are having the children support us. We're supporting the children and kind of supporting us in creating the rules, right, as a community. So there's sort of buy-in there when everybody's voices are in the rules and kind of class norms, another way to put it, maybe. Something that we used to call it was community agreement, or peace agreement. I remember, yeah, and that was each child would put their handprint as like a signature around it, and that sort of that each child is kind of taking ownership of the rules as well, and that might might be a helpful way.
I just swallowed something the wrong way. I know you're sitting close to me. I just swallowed something the wrong way. I love that, the peace agreements, because it makes me think that the children might also help each other follow the rules when you do it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions that are coming in? Getting some thank yous. We love that.
Some timely saying thank you so much. This is perfect timing. Love to hear that.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here with this. Acknowledging good behavior as not so good behavior, so important. Find yourself, yes, constantly kind of acknowledging, reinforcing, supporting that behavior. how do you help a child share? This is such a great question too. And also a great time for me to tell you that we are going to be focusing on social and emotional skills, on preventing challenging behavior throughout our entire year of teacher time. So if you don't get some answers right now, you also please tune in throughout the year because we'll go deep on these. But I think that the one about teaching a child to share is, there's so many strategies, right? So one is that we can have a lot of the same thing in a classroom so that children maybe start out developmentally not having to share, but they could have something that's very similar. The next thing might be that we role play. What does it look like to share? And really reinforce, like, wow, you're being such a great friend for sharing. We can do things where a child who's really good at sharing is paired up with a child who might need some more support by doing some buddy days, where it's buddy play day and you play with a buddy, and I'm going to intentionally pair up maybe a child that is not so good. You're both good at sharing, but let's say Virginia has a hard time, and Same is like my social sharing star, and I pair them up together so that they can model and learn from each other. So some strategies there. Do you have other great strategies for helping support children with sharing?
When I hear that, the first thing I hear about are sand timers. And I know we talked about sand timers, but I mean, I've seen them work like a charm, because having that physical thing of when this runs out, then it's my turn is just so supportive. Again, the teacher's out of the picture, the children are working on it together, and they have this third party sand timer that's supporting them in this. And I've seen it work really like a charm. I'm a huge fan of those.
Absolutely. And you just made me think about Same too, that chart that Gail, you were showing with the computers, you could do something like that. And when my turn is done, you can have it. And I will give you the toy or the card or whatever it is. That visual support is just so helpful.
So helpful.
And Deborah Brown in our Q&A is saying sometimes something as simply as a high five each time they share with each other. Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got it, Deborah. Like catching them and reinforcing it. And even if it was just for a moment they share, like, wow, that's great sharing. I love that. Or even just like, great job, high-fiving them. That is so good. Let's see here. We have some people are concerned about rewards not working in the long run. And one of my favorite sayings is never give a naked sticker. And the idea behind that seems kind of silly, but the idea behind that is that the reward, or this kind of tangible reward, might be something that I use initially because I'm asking a child to do something that's really hard for them, that they might not feel internally motivated to do just yet, or intrinsically motivated. So maybe it takes a sticker of their special, of their favorite, character or something that gets them excited at first. But I never give a naked sticker, meaning that I'm also providing some social explanation or reinforcement for that, like saying, like, you know what, when you shared, and I might be giving that sticker, but when you shared, I saw Same's face really brighten up and smile. I think that really made Same feel happy. How did that make you feel? Right. And so I'm making sure that kind of, maybe I'm also bringing out some intrinsically motivating pieces. So yes, rewards given without any kind of social support around them or explanation might not work in the long run, but pair it and it might.
Right. And I really loved how you named it, Gail. Naming it so children understand why they're getting the reward. And that's a natural consequence, when you're doing things that are, positive and helpful things happen, And so I think it's a really,
very good point. Positive and helpful things happen. I love that. And somebody says it's not the reward, it's the moment. And I absolutely agree. And using both is great. Okay, great. We're getting such great conversations, and we're hoping that these conversations continue over in My Peers. We will see you there with additional questions and answers. If you've got pictures you can share of things that you've done in classrooms or seen in classrooms, again, not probably with children in them, but like we've done so much about the environment. So if you can send some pictures about your environment in My Peers, if you could submit some pictures of your visuals, and if you want those featured on the next teacher time, let us know, because we will make sure to bring those into the next teacher time. This is our time together. It's a circle time for teachers. It's time for us to share ideas and tips and tricks. Thank you so much. Thank you to my two incredible co-hosts. This was a
Thank
ton
you.
of fun.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to our producers, Ryan and Dougal, right there in the back, our Q&A support. They have flying fingers, I can see. I can't believe how quickly they can respond. And we are excited for our next teacher time. And remember, we alternate those. So sometimes it's infants and toddlers, sometimes it's preschool. So tune into the one that works best for you or for all of them. We'd love to see you there. Okay.
Thank you.
Signing off. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great day.